Nom. Hey filmmakers, let's animate. Today we're talking about animation. Have you ever wanted to make your own animated film but you weren't sure if you had the skills or equipment necessary to make a polished animated short? You do. If you're watching this video on a phone, a tablet, a laptop, you have everything you need already. Like all filmmaking techniques, animation uses a series of still images to create the illusion of movement. By that definition, all animation, including hand-drawn and computer animation, is kind of stop motion. But traditionally, people refer to stop motion as using posable objects moved tiny amounts to create that illusion of movement. What I love about stop motion for beginners is that you don't need any fancy modeling software. Gwinnett Library has that, or animation software, and if you're careful, you can even get away without editing. Gwinnett Library has that too. So, what kind of supplies can we use? Toys are great. Now, when people think about stop motion, a lot of times they think about claymation, which is stop motion using clay figurines. The great thing about toys is they're already designed for you. They're pretty posable, and they'll stand up on their own. Now, it doesn't have to be your favorite interlocking brick system, but there are some advantages. They come with base plates that they can stand on. They have interchangeable parts, and you might already have some instructions kicking around for some background sets. A police station, or a fire department, or a magic castle, or a space opera planet. Hypothetically. Other toys are great too. Action figures are posable. Some of them stand up on their own. They might need a little help, it's like some tape or some putty, something to keep them up in between shots. Stuffed toys or other non-posable animals. You'd be surprised what kind of stories you can tell with just an animal moving around. Geometric shapes and colors. They can swirl around, they can build up, they can collapse. You can put it to music. Use your imagination. It doesn't have to be a regular narrative story to be an interesting animation. Or you can animate yourself. But wait, I like to draw. Okay, so you want to draw. Stop motion is still a great way to showcase your drawing skills without having to redraw every single frame like you would with hand-drawn animation. Using hand-drawn figures in stop motion, you want to remember that you're still creating posable figures that you'll move around on a flat background. Anything that you want to move needs to be a separate piece. If you want to incorporate any changes you make to your figure, you'll have to have multiple drawings for those. One last thing to consider before jumping into software and hardware is consider your background. As we mentioned with interlocking bricks, a background could go a long way towards telling your story. If you're doing a two-dimensional stop motion or if you're using posable figures, make sure that there's something behind them or that the thing that's behind them makes sense for the story. So let's talk about software. As a quick disclaimer, neither I nor the library have received any incentive for my recommendations. I'm just picking ones that are easy and easily available. The first one is Stop Motion Studio. It has a free version, but it's a little limited. I recommend the paid version. It's only a couple of bucks, but it's available for iOS or Android, so that's a great option if you have a phone or a tablet ready to go at home. The other option I have up here, Chrome Web Store, which adds extensions to your Chrome browser. So that means any laptop, Chromebook will be able to run this program. Stop Motion. Today I'm going to focus on AquioCam. I'm going to click on that. You can see there's a little blue button on the right that says Add to Chrome. I'm going to click on that. Your extensions live under this puzzle piece in the top right corner of your Chrome browser. The first time you log in, it's going to ask you if you want to sign in with your Google account. You can just X out of that or hit the skip. Here we are in AquioCam Stop Motion. This, like other programs, has a couple of features that I recommend. The first is called onion skinning. I feel like this is the most important one for stop motion. It's up here on the upper left. It has a little toggle switch. You can toggle it on or off. What onion skinning does is it lets you see where your last photo was taken. When I take a photo, it will leave a little reminder of where my photo was last time. The reason onion skinning is important is it lets you see how much of a movement you're making between each shot, and that will affect how fast your motion is, and it'll affect how choppy the movement is. Another reason I think onion skinning is important is that if you drop the camera or you move a piece too far, there's a chance you can get it back. Which leads me to the second big thing you want to look for in your stop motion software, and that is frame rate. Some softwares may offer that as a setting. OcuCam gives you the option to choose your frame rate at the end of your recording. Frame rate is an important thing to understand because it affects the smoothness of your animation. The more frames you have, the smoother the animation will move. The smaller my movements, the smoother and slower they will be. If I start to make larger gaps, that will be faster and potentially choppier movements. You can get away with as low as about 10 frames per second and still have a pretty decent animation. But if you want to bump it up to a little smoother, 15 frames per second is usually pretty reliable. You can do more, but again, that's more work. So there's lots of animation softwares out there. If you're choosing your own, make sure you choose one that has onion skinning and one that lets you choose the frame rate of your animation in case you want to go for a higher frame rate. Let's look at setting up our equipment. We're going to start today with a Chromebook laptop using webcam, which I think is the hardest option because the webcam is a wide angle and you have to get the laptop pretty close to your subject. For my demonstration, you can see that I'm just using a white backdrop. A piece of poster board works well. I also have 2 lights on it. You can use any lights you have in the house. I'm using lights I have in the lab turned down low to be similar to house lighting. The reason you use lights is to get rid of some of the extra shadows and make sure your subject is well lit. You can see that I built a platform for the robot and my backdrop. That allows me to slide the laptop in and get it real close to the subject. If you're using a laptop, I also recommend using an external keyboard if you have access to one, because that'll make it much easier for you to hit that button every time you want to take a shot rather than try and get into the keyboard up there. If you are recording your animation on a computer and you have access to one, a webcam can help. It'll let you move the camera around, get closer to your subject without having to get the computer so close. Another good option if you have one is a stop motion specific camera. They sometimes come in little animation kits. The nice thing about this one is it has a focus ring so you can get that focus real close. You can also use the laptop for 2-dimensional animation, but it is a little tricky. It's a bit of a balancing act for the laptop, and I had some trouble keeping my shadow out of the animation area. You can see with my first attempt with the caterpillar animation, there's a lot of shadows. Now this is my setup for using a phone or a tablet. If you have a stand for a phone or a tablet, that would be ideal. You can always make something. I used a microphone stand with some rubber bands, and you can see I still have access to my phone and I can push the button when I need to take a photo. I still added lights and a backdrop, but you can see that this setup is much easier. And for a 2-dimensional animation, I'm using the same equipment. This time I'm putting the microphone stand out sideways. You can use anything to hold your phone or tablet as long as it doesn't block your camera and it's fairly stable. But a flatter surface or 2 poles makes for a better setup than what I have here because this one is a little wobbly. For my last setup, I'm here at the Five Forks Learning Lab where we have a light box. The light box gives easy fill light and it has openings both for you to access your animation and to add your camera. I'm using my stop motion camera for this one. It's dangling through and I have all my animation parts laid out with my computer software. You can see that I marked out the safe area with blue tape. That way I would have a general idea of where the frame begins and ends. With the fill light, I found that I could even move the camera down into the recording area and still not have any major shadows. You can use your own computer, or you can use one of the lab's 2 iMac computers to record your animation. Stop motion animation can be a lot of work. When you consider the 2-minute runtime minimum for the Student Film Fest and you add that to your 15 frames per second, that's over 1,800 frames. You can pad that out a little with your title card and credits. So if you need help, you can always make a book a librarian appointment to learn how to use any of the equipment available in the lab. You can also reserve time to use the space on your own. Don't forget, the Student Film Fest opens for entries November 1st, 2020 and runs through January of 2023. So if you're watching this after the deadline is passed, catch us next year.